Hotep, peace, shalom, assalamu alaikum, konnichiwa, and to those that I have missed, please forgive me. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Turtle Island. We're going to be discussing um, the indigenous peoples. We're going to discuss the Anunnaki. We're also going to discuss Timbukuno. Okay, so welcome to the channel. Please subscribe. It is greatly appreciated. Okay, now tonight, what we're going to talk about um, is um, one of the first things I want to discuss is um, the various names. I think oftentimes we get caught up in the name game. Um, we have gone from the Knox, we've gone from uh, Moorish, African American, Negro. Um, I mean, we've changed names to represent a certain group of people um, throughout history. And I think that that's where a lot of people are getting caught up in the name game. Now, I can't speak for everybody, um, but we have to get beyond the word game. Okay, if we're gonna go forward, or if we're gonna progress, we're gonna have to get beyond the name game that is being played with our minds. When we talk about Native Americans or Mesoamericans, um, Aboriginals, um, now throughout history, people have traveled from one place to another. And during the time of Benjamin Franklin traveling, he wrote about his travels and the things that he saw in his journey. Um, and one of the things that he wrote about were these swarthy people. And the thing that he was stating about the swarthy people was that it was upsetting him, first of all, that everywhere he went, these swarthy people were all over the place. And one of the places that he mentioned that the swarthy people were in the North Americans, in the South American area, in the American area. So one of the things we need to keep in mind is when we talk about Native Americans, we are talking about Black people, Swarthy people, Moorish people, Hebrew Israelites, uh, whichever you prefer. Um, and we need to keep that in mind. Oftentimes, because of the debates and arguments that may be going on, one tends to separate themselves or differentiate themselves. But if you really, take a gander at things, you can see that these still are pretty much in ancient, in the historical aspect. Um, these are pretty much some of the same people. Um, Now, another thing we want to talk about is when these people were fleeing other lands, when the Hyksos and the Hittite invasion was going on during the times in ancient Egypt, many of the uh, original people began to flee to different geographical locations. One of the places that they traveled to and began to dwell was in Scotland. They left from um, They left from Egypt and they traveled from various places. Now, don't get me wrong. They have been traveling before it, the essence of ancient, Kemet. But we want to make sure we understand that there were the original people in these Kemites, who the Nubians, who left, before, during, and after the Hyksos and Hittite invasions, the Habiru. And some of them, like I said, they went to various geographical locations. Everybody split up and went in various different directions. One of the directions that they went in was Ireland, the Scotland, and Germany, into the Europe, the Iberian Peninsula. Um, they traveled there, and from there, they traveled to the Americas as well. Um, so one of the things that we have to understand is that there was always a presence of indigenous people in Americas before the Europeans ever attempted to think about being civilized or arrived. So before the Moors civilized the Europeans, there was a presence of indigenous people already in the Americas before they were even civilized to begin to even come out of the Caucasus Mountains and to travel. So I think that we need to be clear about that. Um, about the fact that there was travel, there were indigenous people in the Americas before the Moors civilized Europeans. The Moors not only traveled to Europe, they were traveling to the Americas as well. Okay. Um, and as I stated, they were here, way before the arrival of the Europeans. Um, so we need to begin to try to understand, our journeys. Okay, we journeyed across the planet throughout the ages of time. Okay, before we were journeying throughout the planet, before the civilizing of the Europeans, before the Moors went into the Caucasus Mountains and attempted to civilize them. And we already got into one of the reasons why the Moors went into the Caucasus Mountains and they began to civilize the Europeans, because the unhealthy, unsanitized ways that they were living was causing a humanitarian crisis. Okay, not being able to bury their dead, living and sleeping with the animals, and living unhealthy, uh, incestuous practices, um, their homosexual behavior. So when the Moors came in to civilize them, they brought with them, as they did all over the place. They didn't just do this in Europe. Moors, wherever they went, whether it be Asia, whether it be Southeast Asia, whether it be Canada, wherever they traveled around the planet, they always brought different understandings, different teachings, various things with them. And as I stated, with the Europeans not being able to bury their dead, living unhealthy, they were using rocks to wipe their backsides. They didn't have a, 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 a system of bathing. We had to teach them how to bathe. They only washed once a year. We taught them about, bathing, fabrics, silks, how to brush their teeth, grooming themselves, cutting their hair, barbers, we taught a lot of things. Okay. And as I stated, one of the reasons that uh, the more civilized Europeans is because their unhealthy lifestyle had become a humanitarian crisis. When you pass Europe, it had an odor that lingered for miles that was causing, it's like COVID. You inhale it shortly down shortly down your travels on your ship, you would find a ship full of dead people because they traveled this area inhaled these toxic fumes from death and corrosion, okay, filthy, unhealthy lifestyles. And as a result of inhaling these things, they eventually died. Okay, so that was, and it wasn't just it. This problem was a problem that was causing a humanitarian crisis. Okay, when people are dying as a result of unhealthy lifestyles, um, you know, it was a major problem that needed to be addressed, because this was an area that we were familiar with traveling because we did trade, and we were traders of various trade routes. So we had to conduct our business and we had to travel this area, and not just us, other people that were doing business was traveling this area. So we had to deal with this problem. Okay. Um, um, Another thing that we're going to talk about is the Jaguar Warriors. Now, the Jaguar Warriors have been around, I can't even begin to tell you how old they are. Okay. I can't give you a precise estimate on their age, but I can tell you one thing about the Jaguar Warriors. They have been seen all across the planet throughout history. Okay. They were worshiped in various geographical locations. Okay, and we're going to talk about over here in Americas. Um, there are, images of the Jaguar warrior. You can see him coming, and the village is waiting. They're waiting to see him. He travels. Apparently, he comes at a certain time throughout the year, and they're all dressed in a certain attire. He's dressed in his attire so that they can distinguish him from anybody else. Okay, and when he comes through, they all sit and wait and worshiping, waiting on him. And when he comes through with his leopard skin attire, they have a festival for him. Okay, they have a festival, they dance, um, they participate in sun dances, and these festivals are ancient traditions. Okay, they're paying homage, and these are ancient traditions that are taught, spiritual and cultural traditions that are practiced on a global scale. Okay, and these were taught by the Jaguar warriors and the indigenous peoples. Okay, and these things were taught to um, ensure that everyone across the planet, and I'm going to say that one more time, everyone across the planet. Okay, you can go, I don't care if you go to Brazil, I don't care if you go to Rio de Janeiro, any place you see the mask on the faces, because in Rio they do it as well. In Brazil they do it as well. They cover their faces. They have festivals. They paint their faces. They come out and they dance at a certain time every year. They pay homage, and they have been doing this for thousands of years because that's what we taught them to do. Okay, when you look into the church and you see them practicing the Holy Ghost and the Holy Spirit, those are ancient traditions we have taught all across the planet. If you go to China, they have an ancient festival. They wear face paint, they wear the dragon mask. These are ancient traditions that we have taught throughout history, from one civilization to another. Okay. So we need to begin to understand um, the presence of um, the Kemites, whichever you prefer, Kemites, Native Americans, Indigenous, the presence of the Indigenous people all over the planet. Okay. Making, when we talk about, oh, well, you're from Africa. Oh, well, I'm over here from Asia. Oh, well, I'm over here from America. I am indigenous to the entire planet. Now, I can't speak for other people, but when it comes down to my genetic makeup, it has a connection with the entire planet as well as the entire universe. Okay? There is a connection, okay, with nature, okay? So we have to understand how all of these things correlate and they tie into one thing. When we look at religions, when we look at Islam, when we look at um, Christianity, Buddhism, when you look at all of these things, one thing you have to begin to understand is that they are a derivation of one thing. Okay? They are a derivation. They just broken up in something else. Okay, this is came from here, but we're gonna break this little piece off, and we're gonna go here. We're gonna take this little piece, and we're gonna go in that direction. But when you pull it all together, it is obvious, and it shows that it was all one. It was all one, one. Okay, it was all. It's all a derivation of self. Okay. So we have to understand and we have to begin to see ourselves, which is the beauty of ourselves in everything. When we look at the Asian culture, when I look at the Asian culture, I am amazed and so fascinated by it because, it's showing the things that we have taught throughout history. And it shows that the, the Asians have, kept up traditions, no different than the church. We taught the church certain things. Now, when we talk about the church and we talk about religion, let's be clear here. It's when I can put anybody in control that has good nature or a bad nature person. Okay. But it doesn't change the fact that my foundation is thus this or that. Okay. So when we talk about the church, one thing we have to keep in mind is that the church has no different than these festivals that we have taught where they do sun dances, where they worship. It's no different. Um, they're all pretty much the same thing. And this is something that we have taught all over the planet. Okay. When we talk about the sun dances, um, and we talk about the Asian culture and the dragons, and you see, and when we talk about Asian culture, when we speak of fighting styles and martial arts, we have to be honest about one of the first fighting styles was Kubigani Nigumi, and that is something that derived from ancient Kemet. Okay, Kubigani Nagumi is one of the first fighting styles with fist. I don't know, how old karate is and jujitsu, but I can tell you that Kubigani Nagumi is ancient. Okay, and these fighting styles are seen not just in Asia but all across the planet, which is where we and our ancestors have traveled. They have established themselves all over the world, ancient civilizations throughout the beginning of time. Okay. And like I said, when you begin to look and understand some of these things, it's absolutely fascinating. When you see the ancient pyramidal structures and also the ancient carvings and art on the walls, and you can clearly see the jaguar warrior dressed up in his leopard skin. I mean, you can see that you can tell he's dressed different. Nobody else has on his leopard skin, okay? Nobody else is allowed to wear the leopard skin, other than the jaguar warrior, okay? And you see him coming through with his cape on. I mean, he looking all good and everything, and they all getting down to worship him. They respect him. They look up at him in, honor. They see him as an essence of royal presence. Okay, they see him as omnipotent. They see him as the omnibenevolent. They see him as alpha male. They see this presence as the preeminent presence, primordial, the supernatural. And with this presence that's coming to them, they know that with the supernatural presence, it's going to bring this aurora. And then they are building from this aurora, these teachings, the wisdom, the knowledge, teaching them various skills that they can use. So while he's gone, they can be doing things. They won't just be idle sitting around. So, it's a beautiful thing. To see these ancient spiritual and cultural practices by the indigenous peoples all over the planet. When we talk about the Anunnaki, we're talking about the supernatural presence of An and Ki. Okay, when we talk about the Ka, these are ancient pronunciations of the Metuneta. Okay, when we talk about um, these ancient teachings, and we talk about the pyramidal structures over here in North America, in South America as well. When we talk about these, we're talking about the same people who have, migrated, moved from one geographical location to another. Some stayed, some went, some left. But the bottom line is they still of the original people. Okay, and they're located in various locations all over the planet. Okay, now in over here in North America, just like over in ancient Kemet in Africa, we got Timbuktu. Well, over here in North America, we have Timbukuno. Okay, Timbuktuno. All right. So we have the presence of the Nubians all over the planet. Okay, you have the presence of the Nubians all over the planet and their contributions that have been made. Now, when we talk about the pyramidal structures here in America, in certain places you can't even go in, you can't even go near them. Okay, um, a lot of it is being kept secret for whatever purposes. Um, but there is no denial that indigenous people were in the Americas long before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. And from my understanding, when the Europeans began to uh, drift towards the Americas, or guide them, be guided towards the Americas, they were guided by Pedro the Moor. He was also, and one of the reasons why I think that the Moors were, like Pedro the Moor, because they were talking about how Moors represents the guiding and the steering of the ship. Now, one of the reasons is also because there were things that we taught the Europeans, and there were things that we taught them in attempts to civilize them, but we didn't teach them everything. Okay. And initially, you didn't teach them how to read the compass. Initially, you didn't teach them how to read a compass. And these were some of the tools that the Moors had brought with them. They brought tools, they brought all sorts of things with them. And one of the tools that they brought with them was a compass. Um, because this was one of the things that they used to navigate their ways from one trade area to another to conduct their business. Okay. Um, Another thing that I wanted to talk about um, is Nova Scotia. Okay. Um, Now, the Pygmies are people who left who migrated from one geographical location to another. Now, in Ireland, that was a major presence of the Pygmies. There was said to have been a genocide that had transpired to kind of annihilate the existence of the pygmies. Well, some of that is true, but the presence of the pygmies are not was not just in Ireland, and the presence of the pygmies is all over the planet. Okay, when you look at Rwanda, um, you look at the Hutu and the Tutsi. Okay, and it is a very touchy subject because the genocide that Rwanda experienced, it was absolutely, it was an atrocity. It's very hurtful to even begin to talk about how we have allowed outsiders to come in and to divide us to the point where we have no value for life and we do not value each other. Okay. But when you look at the Congo, when you look at Uganda, when you look at Rwanda, you will see the presence of the pygmies, um, Twa, the Batwa. Um, and the pygmies are, from my understanding, billions of years old. I don't think that they can really put a precise calculation or a precise estimate, as to how old they actually are. Um, but we know that they are the oldest people on the planet, the oldest skeletal remains on the planet, and you can um, and Dr. Eileen Bay has brought that information to the forefront when he discusses the pygmies and he addresses the essence of the original people and the oldest known skeletal remains on the planet. Dr. Eileen Bay um, has a lot of great information in regards to the origins of humanity. So you might want to check the brother out. Um, but as I stated before, um, we have to begin to gather our information and we have to begin to understand that there is a disconnect, there is a strategy that has been put in place to keep us divided by trying to separate us based upon names. Okay, we got to get beyond this name game crap. I know that we're smarter than that. Okay, we got to get beyond this name game. Um, Another thing that I wanted to talk about is that with us beginning to embrace our culture more, with us knowing who we are, with us doing, intense research and studies on ourselves, and uncomprehending the essence of our existence and our origins, you're going to have people who are envious of you. You're going to have people who are angry that they are not you. So you're going to have people who are going to attempt to erase you. You're going to have people who are going to attempt to steal your identity. Okay? They don't want to be themselves. They want to be you. Okay, because throughout history it says that you are the chosen ones. Okay, you represent that supernatural essence. You represent eternal life. You represent immortality. Okay, you represent the endless possibilities, which is a beautiful thing. Okay, um and that's what we have to begin to look at ourselves as, the endless possibilities, how beautiful we are, the great contributions that we have made throughout society, throughout civilizations. It had it not been for us, many of these civilizations, many of these people would have never been able to sustain life, especially when we talk about the Europeans. I mean, had the Moors not civilized them, had the Moors not brought them oils, incense, and had the Moors not taught them how to bathe and care for themselves with all those boils that they was having all over their bodies, all those bubonic plagues that they were having from the nasty, filthy lifestyle, and the diseases that were coming from Europe, okay, creating various health issues and humanitarian crisis all over the planet. Had it not been for the Moors, they would not have survived. They would not have made it. Not with the lifestyle that they were living. Not you sleeping with a dog laying next to him in the bed, and you got a big boil on the side of your neck. You got a boil on the side of your butt, up under your armpit. Wherever you may have the boil, whatever. Okay, you don't have any cleaning rags. Oh gosh, please don't even start. Okay, the bubonic plague, the Black Plague. Whew, I'm not even going to talk about it, but we're going to talk about how eventually we will get into how the Red Cross, that Red Cross from that bubonic plague, now represents the Red Cross represents um, um, you know uh, helping people across the planet. It is a representation of, the American, I mean, well, not the American, but it's a representation of medical attention. If there is a humanitarian crisis, you have this Red Cross that will come and travel across the world to help aid the people, supposed to help give out donations. They're doing a various things. But one of the first places that we can remember this Red Cross in existence and being a major symbolism um, for people in need was during the bubonic plague, when they went around from one home to another, and if someone in that house had the plague, you were to mark the door with a red cross. Okay. You were marked, and not only would they mark the door with the Red Cross, they would mark the door with the Red Cross, and they would lock the people in the home. The people, they would seal the door up, lock them in, because this family had had the plague, lock them in, and the door was not open probably until the whole entire family was dead. Okay, that's going to be for another day. Um, to address that. But these are some of the things that we want to discuss. And not only that, now let's talk about during the time of the bubonic plague and time of major crises, illnesses like this, because this is kind of like the COVID. During these times, the people of royal standards, people who were financially stable, people who had high titles, um, they fled. Many of them fled to the Americas. And that's how they brought some of the sicknesses and diseases over here to the Americas. Okay, and began to make people sick. And we're not going to talk about them taking the blanket from where they had wrapped up people with the bubonic plague and people who were sick with these different diseases, and they brought those blankets over here and they gave them to the natives as a peace offering, knowing darn well that those blankets were, had been on the bodies of people who were infected with some forms of bacteria and uh, 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 unhealthy diseases. Um, so there is a lot of things that you can learn when you study the culture and you study the history of um, of the indigenous peoples, the aboriginals, whichever you want to call them, whichever you prefer. Um, but as I stated, when we talk about um, the jaguar warriors who are seen in leopard skin, okay, um, when you talk about them, there is an essence of the jaguar warriors all over the planet, and especially in the Americas. They are bringing um, various gifts. They were worshipped. They threw festivals, waiting. The Jaguar warrior would come through at a certain time of year. And when it was about that time for him to come, everybody would get dressed up in their mask. They would put on their face paint. They were dressed up in their finest, in their best attire. Okay. When you're dealing with royalty, when you're dealing with that royal bloodline, and you're dealing with the omnipresence, and you're dealing with the omnibenevolent, okay? Who distinguishes themselves from everything else. But when you're dealing with that omnipresence and that eternal essence, you give it all, you give it your best. So they were dressed up in their finest, they would dance, they would party, and I mean they would chant, and they would worship. They had a great time. And these are traditions, these are cultural traditions and spiritual traditions that are still practiced throughout America, throughout the entire planet. The church still practice the traditions. You see them doing the Holy Ghost. They have the holy dance that they do in the church. You see that the church is also still, it pays homage and holds the great mother and the great mother and the golden child in the highest regards. Okay. And it's they're still practicing these traditions right now today. Okay. So, when we talk about the Jaguar warriors, we talk about Swarthy people, when we talk about Native Americans, um, we talk about indigenous people, we're talking about Turtle Island. And America is considered to be Turtle Island. Okay. Um, this is where the essence of the Niji were. Okay. And you have the essence of the Niji all over the planet. You have the essence of the Naga all over the planet. You have the essence of the Negus everywhere. Okay. Um, that's the beauty about nature. Okay. So with that being said, um, well, and another thing that I wanted to talk about is the Moors Sundry Act in 1790. Okay. This is the Moors attempting to establish a sense of self-governing um, on Turtle Island. Okay. So when you look at the Sundry Act of 1790, you look at the Moors in the um, state of South Carolina, in the deep South, you see them, as well as others, attempting to establish a sense of self-governing here in Turtle Island. You see them attempting to establish an essence of spirituality and an essence of their origins and their presence in the um in the Americas. And also this is a representation, this is also a representation of the fact that they not only establish essences of systems of self-governing in Europe, but they also did it on Turtle Island as well. So I'm gonna stop calling America the Americas in a minute. You're not even gonna hear me refer to it as the Americas. You're gonna begin to hear me refer to it as Turtle Island. And not only another thing that we want to talk about in Turtle Island, um, and in the Americas is this ancient presence of the burnt skin people. Okay. Also, you can see the pyramidal structures, um, where you have the pointy top of the pyramidal structure at the pinnacle. Then you have the flat top, okay, of the pyramidal structures. Okay. And we're going to get into that, the flat top pyramidal structures, in another video. But just giving you clues. And also in Memphis. There are pyramids all over. It's not just pyramids in Egypt. It's not just pyramids in Africa. It's pyramids all over where it's pyramids in Peru, it's pyramids in Asia, it's pyramids over here, it's pyramids everywhere because this is what we have done throughout history for centuries, thousands of years, travel from one geographical location to another. One of the things that we did when we did business, we had trade routes all over the planet. And so and these trade routes were many of them were established before the Europeans were civilized as well. We were doing trade. We were still trading and um, uh, associating with other people and other um, nations, as far as business and trading various shells, ivory, I mean, rice, oils. We may have needed something from over here. It just depended. Okay. But the bottom line is we're established all over the planet. Okay. The presence of the indigenous people is the essence of all of human life. Okay. So we want to make that clear. All right. We want to make that clear. And as I stated before, when we look at Ireland, we look at Scotland, we look at Germany, we look at these various locations, you can still clearly see, the essence of the pygmies, the Twa, um, all over the planet, the Moors everywhere, Kemites, whatever the indigenous people all over the place. So the bottom line is you can't evade and you can't escape the fact that the original people in on Turtle Island in North Americas were swarthy because you have as Benjamin Franklin, I would urge you to go look at this. Benjamin Franklin is very upset and he's not the only one. If you look back at some of these European writers, you see they're traveling. Once they come out of the Caucasus Mountains, once they begin to come out of the caves and travel around trying to get, a feel and taking their journeys, they are noticing like, well, dang, everywhere we go is black people everywhere. Dang, I mean, these swarthy people. I mean, we came from Africa, we went over there to Asia, we saw the swarthy people over there. Dad, we over here in North America and swarthy people. I'm sick of everywhere we go is swarthy people. He was very angry about that. Okay. Now, another thing we're going to talk about in Turtle Island and the pygmies here, which is I am definitely a part of the pygmies tribe. We're going to talk about Ota Benga. Now, Ota Benga was kept in a zoo like an animal. Okay, he was kept in the zoo like an animal, um, put on display because he was indigenous. This is one of the reasons why um, Ota Benga was put on display, um, and just to even talk about how they were so fascinated. We can't stand each other, but they are fascinated by us. How they put us on display. How we're not even going to talk about Sarah Bartman. We're not going to talk about the Ivory Mask. They have these things on the display. The Knox. They have all of these things in museums and have these things on display because they are fascinated. Okay, studying. They've been looking all over the planet trying to figure out who they are, but everywhere they go, they keep finding us. Sometimes they don't like that. Okay. When you look at some of the ruins in Rome, in Europe, they're crumbling. I mean, they're not even 20, 30,000 years old and they're already disintegrating. Okay. So, and then, when you look at, you know, being fascinated with various cultures, when we look at ancient Egypt, it's always a fascination. They love digging up the corpses. And this is one of the reasons why um, there was a problem. When you dig up the dead, when you dig up dead bodies and you digging and disrespecting the dead, it upsets universal law and order and the universal law and order and nature of things, because it's not natural and it's not normal for you to dig up something that has been laid to rest. But see, these are the things that this is one of the things that was a problem. This is one of the reasons why we attempted to civilize them, because this is the type of behavior that they were displaying. They were going around digging up corpses, eating off of a corpse. Cannibalism, that's the type of stuff that they were doing. Okay. And when you do things like that, you're eating on dead bodies, that causes disease. It causes bacteria, it causes infections, all sorts of viruses that could become potentially unhealthy for all of humanity. It can become a humanitarian crisis, and it did at that point in time. Okay. So, um, we discussed a couple of things. I hope that there was some clarity brought. Um, And again, as I stated, we have to understand that um, Turtle Island, there were always indigenous people on Turtle Island. The European can't tell you much about, the original people. How can you tell me about the original people if you weren't around when they originated? If you are the youngest person that came into existence, what can you tell me about the elder? You can't tell me nothing about the elder. The elder got to tell me about the elder, or the generation right after the elder can tell me about the elder. But you, the last person, it's nothing you can tell me. What you can do is what you've been doing when the Jaguar Warriors come through, what you was doing when the Moors came through. Get Indian style. I want you to get Indian style. Fold your legs up, light up a fire, and then we'll tell you what had happened before you came into existence. Huh? Sitting around the fire. Want you to get in Indian style. Sit down and listen to the stories like you've been doing throughout the ages. See, some people don't want to admit how old they are, who they are. They want to pretend as if there's something that they're not. And that's what you call stealing somebody's identity. Okay? That is what you call self hatred. When people are not happy with themselves and become fascinated with others. And you become fascinated with others because you don't want to focus on who you are. Because when you begin to focus on who you are, you start seeing Vlad the Impaler. You start seeing the Archbishop Conrad, who is seen in Europe sucking his own phallus. We're not even going to get into anything deeper. I don't even want to begin to go there on some of the demonic, uncivil uh, artwork. And I can't believe that you would even make stuff like that. But hey, when we talk about Archbishop Conrad, who is seen blowing himself, this is one of the reasons why they don't want to look at and embrace their own culture. They fascinated with somebody else's culture, because when you look at that type of behavior, somebody sucking on themselves, I mean, what can you learn from that? Huh? When we talk about Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, some of the great philosophers of the Europeans, some of the greatest philosophers will tell you quickly, we got everything that we know. We learned from the ancient Egyptians, from the burnt skin people. We was over here twiddling our thumbs. But those are the great philosophers of ancient, and when they don't have very many, right? They don't have, listen, they don't make them like Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. Because whatever their sexual behavior may have been, at least they were honest about where they obtained their knowledge, which gave them a different perspective and a different understanding. When they left from Europe and traveled to Egypt, they were idiots to a certain degree. But once they went to Egypt, studied astrology, they began to study what was on the walls, and they came back and they had the most profound understandings. And they paid, and they expressed that we went to Egypt, and these was we learned mathematics, astrology. When you talk about Pythagoras, people like that. So it's a lot of people that don't want to admit who they are. They don't want to admit where they came from. So many of them don't know. Okay. So when you have to understand that ignorance is not defined by color, there are people who are ignorant of all ethnic backgrounds. Okay. Understand that. So with that being said, I am going to end there. Hotep, peace, and I hope that this was enlightening to you all. I hope it brought some form of information. So peace until the next time, Hotep.